are about to experience, Jackson Snyder presents. Direct from the Vero Essin Yahad, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
There are innumerable accounts of the revolt of Satan and of the angels fallen from heaven, from the Middle East, and from times of antiquity. And here's another. This comes from the Cave of Treasures. And this account was rewritten sometime around the end of the 4th century from a much earlier text from Ephraim, or Saint Mar Ephraim, or Ephraim the Syrian, who has a long account of the first 7 days, that is, the creation, and he begins with a prayer. O our sovereign, help thou me in thy mercy. Amen. In the middle of the account, after the portion called the creation of Adam, we have the revolt of Satan and the battle in heaven, and it reads like this. And when the prince of the lower order of angels saw what great majesty had been given unto Adam, in the earlier paragraph, Adam has been put on a throne. Satan was jealous of him from that day, and he didn't wish to worship him. And he said unto his hosts,
You shall not worship him, and you shall not praise him with the angels. It is meet that you should worship me, because I am fire and spirit, and not that I should worship a thing of dust, which has been fashioned of fine dust.
And the rebel mediating these things would not render obedience to Elohim, and of his own free will he asserted his independence and separated himself from Elohim. But he was swept away out of heaven and fell, and the fall of him and all his company from heaven took place on the 6th day, at the 2nd hour of their day. And the apparel of their glorious state was stripped off them, and his name was called Satanya, because he turned aside from the right way, and Shedah, because he was cast out, and Daiwa, because he lost the apparel of his glory. And behold, from that time until the present day, he and all his hosts have been stripped of their apparel, and they go naked, and have horrible faces. And when Satana was cast out from heaven, Adam was raised up, so that he might ascend to paradise in a chariot of fire. And the angels went before him, singing praises. And the seraphim ascribed holiness unto him, and the cherubim ascribed blessing, and amid cries of joy and praises, Adam went into paradise. And as soon as Adam entered paradise, he was commanded not to eat of a certain tree. His entrance into heaven took place at the 3rd hour of the eve of the Shabbat, that is Friday morning. And from the modern translator's notes, we have these. The fathers of the Egyptian and Ethiopian churches treat the story of the fall of Satan in great detail. According to them, Satan, or Satanya, or Satanel, or Satnael, was greatly astonished at the beauty and splendor of the sun and moon, and on the 4th day of the week he declared himself that he would set his throne above the stars, and make himself equal to Elohim. 1 week after the creation of Adam, Satan declared war on the hosts of Almighty Elohim. These were commanded by Michael and consisted of 120,000 horsemen, 600,000 shield-bearers, 700,000 mail-clad horsemen in chariots of fire, 700,000 torch-bearers, 800,000 angels with daggers of fire, 1,000,000 slingers, 500,000 bearers of axes of fire, 300,000 bearers of fiery crosses, and 400,000 bearers of lamps. The angels uttered their battle cries and began to fight, but Satan charged them and dispersed them. They reformed, but again Satan charged them and put them to flight. Then Elohim gave the angels the cross of light, which bore the legend,
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
And when they attacked the hosts of darkness under this cross, Satan became faint, and he and his forces withdrew, and Michael hurled them down into hell. The Abyssinian legend says that Satan was 1,700 cubits high, and his hand 70 cubits long, and his foot 7,000 cubits long. His mouth was 40 cubits in width. His face was as broad as the distance of a day's journey, and the length of his eyebrows was a distance of 3 days' journey. That comes from the Book of the Mysteries of Heaven and Earth. Prototype of the great fight in heaven between the powers of light and darkness is found in ancient Egyptian religious texts, and in more than one form. In the oldest form, Set, the devil, repels against Herur, the god of heaven, whose chief symbols are the sun and the moon, and is utterly defeated. In the next form, Set attacks the sun god Ra, and is destroyed by him. The great ally of Set, called Apophis or Apep, and all his fiends and devils, called the Sibol, are defeated and burned up daily. In another form, Set makes war on Horus, the son of Osiris, and on Osiris himself, and is utterly defeated. The Coptic version of the legend was borrowed from the old hieroglyphic texts, then obviously Christianized. Compare the following from the Coptic texts. When Satan saw Adam seated on a great throne with a crown of glory on his head and a scepter in his hand, and all the angels worshipping him, he was filled with anger. And when Elohim said to him,
Come thou also, for thou shalt worship my image and likeness.
Satan refused to do so, and, assuming an arrogant and insolent manner, he said,
It is meet that he should worship me, for I existed before he came into being.
When the Father saw this overbearing attitude, he knew that Satan's wickedness and rebellion had reached their highest peak. He ordered the celestial soldiers to take from him the written authority that was in his hand, to strip off his armor, and to hurl him down from heaven to earth. Satan was the greatest of the angels, and Elohim had made him the commander-in-chief of the celestial hosts. And in the document that Satan held in his hand were written the names of all the angels under his command. Knowing their names, his authority over them was absolute. When Elohim saw that the angels hesitated to take the document from him, he commanded them to bring a sharp reaping knife and to stab him on this side and that, right through his body to the backbone and shoulder blades, so that Satan can no longer stand upright. And a cherub smote him, and broke his wings and ribs, and having rendered him helpless, he cast Satan down from heaven upon the earth. Then he became the archdevil, and the leader of those who were cast out of heaven with him, and who henceforth were devils. And in this explanation, there are a variety of hieroglyphics that are very familiar pictographs of things we know: certain birds, a sitting king, a cane, a foot, a feather, a chick, and a fighting man. So these texts tell us that Adam was set up to rule over the angels. And when the angels approached Satan to take the writings of authority away from him, obviously they were scared, because he had been the powerful commander-in-chief, or the tzviot, of Elohim's armies. And as for the troops of Michael, 120,000 horsemen, 600,000 shield-bearers, etc., these supposed angels are set here as anthropomorphic characters. After all, what does an angel need a slingshot for, or a lamp for? And then, though they were defeated 2 times before, Elohim gave the angels the cross of light, perhaps the same cross of light we find in the Gospel of Peter, that cross of light leading the Messiah out of the cave of death. And we also see that Adam is made and exalted first, and at the denouement of his apotheosis, he is brought down, evidently to earth again, to take up his place in paradise, that is, Gan Eden or Eden. As far as Eden is concerned, paradise was situated on Mount Eden, beyond the ocean, where it was filled with fruit-bearing trees. The great river that sprung up in it was parted into four heads, which we assume were Pishon, Gihon, Declath, or the Tigris, and Perath, the Euphrates. Pishon flowed through Havilah, where there were beryls and gold and stones of price. Gihon is the Nile River. Declath, or Tigris, flows through Assyria, and Perath is the Euphrates. It's strange that in our generation there have been two wars for the geographic location of paradise. Does it really exist? Is it really a place? Is it there today? Whereas Satan and his angels are cast down to hell, which I assume is Gehenna, that fiery trash heap outside Jerusalem that has a tunnel in it that goes way down into the earth and connects up with the two great caves, that is, the second heaven and the fifth heaven. We read more about that in the Gospel of Bartholomew, which Jesus invades, and the devil and hell who are in there dare him to come down in there, but instead he commands them to come up to the earth. And Satan comes up, because hell is the place it cannot come up. Satan comes up, and he's in the form of a gigantic grub or worm. Perhaps that came from the idea that Gehenna was full of fire and worms. Well, Satan was the biggest one of all, and Jesus brings him up at the request of Bartholomew, and then he tells Bartholomew, when Satan has crawled out, to put his foot on the neck of this gigantic grub. I can't remember how large, but it seems like I remember it was 30 feet across. How does a mere man put his foot on the head of a 30-foot-long grub? But anyway, Bartholomew, in the state of extreme fright, comes forward and somehow puts his foot upon the head of this giant, and the giant submits. Maybe I'll just go get that, because it really does have a lot to do with what we're talking about now and in the time frame, because we've gone into the Christian period now. This text, here's that excerpt from the Gospel of Bartholomew. Jesus compassionately raised Bartholomew to his feet and told him, "Bartholomew, do you truly wish to see the adversary of men? I tell you the truth that the apostles Mary and yourself will all fall on your faces like the dead when you see him." Nevertheless, they all said, "Lord, this is our desire." So he led them down from the Mount of Olives. He bound the demons that protected hell, and commanded Michael to sound the trumpet of authority in the heavens. When the notes of the trumpet reverberated over the earth, it began to shake as though there were an earthquake. And Beliar himself came up from beneath the earth, held by 666 angels, and bound with chains that appear as fire. Beliar seemed to be nearly a mile long by about 40 yards wide. His face was ablaze as though it was lightning, and his eyes were threatening sparks. His nostrils exuded a stinking and foul smoke. His mouth was like the crag of a mountain, and each wing spanned about 80 yards. As soon as the apostles saw the spectacle, they fell down to the ground in a death-like swoon. Jesus came near to each and lifted them up imparting to them the strengthening spirit of power. When Bartholomew recovered, he found this Beliar approaching. Before he could fear any more, Jesus said, "Approach, Beliar, and draw near to him." Bartholomew, he did. Then Jesus told him, "Put your foot on Beliar's neck and take authority over him. Command him to tell you what his mission is and how he deceives men." Then Jesus left Bartholomew there with Beliar and retreated back a space with his apostles. Skipping down a little, then Bartholomew said, "Lord, I fear that Beliar will swallow me whole, since he did not spare your angels." Jesus answered, "Weren't all things created through the Word and according to my Father's plan? Even Shlomo had authority over spirits. Go on then. You have been commanded to do so in my name. Ask him what you wish." Finally, Bartholomew put his foot on the neck of Beliar. To his surprise, he was able to press his face into the ground as far as his ears. Bartholomew asked him, "Tell me your name and who you are." Beliar said, "Oh, let up a little, and I will tell you how great my power is." Then Bartholomew commanded Beliar to return to where he came from. Then he came back to Jesus and prostrated himself before him and began to cry. And he prayed, "Abba, Father, who can't be discovered by mortal men, Word of the Father, whose thought ordained all as it should be. Because of your advent, you have made all souls rejoice at the prospect of the gospel of eternal life. My God, great Father and King, save the sinner, Lord." So that's a little piece of the Gospel of Bartholomew, and that's my own translation. Let us continue. The Cave of Treasures goes on to speak of Satan's attacks on Adam and Eve, and I think I'll read this section too because it does intersect with our subject here, that is Satan's attack on Adam and Eve. "And when Satan saw that Adam and Eve were happy and joyful in paradise, the rebel was smitten sorely with jealousy, and he became filled with wrath. And he went and took up his abode in the serpent, and he raised him up, and made him to fly through the air to the skirts of Mount Eden, whereon was paradise. Now, why did Satan enter the body of the serpent and hide himself therein? Especially if he was a 30-foot wide grub. Because he knew that his appearance was foul, and that if Eve saw his form, she would betake herself to flight straight away before him. Now, the man who wished to teach the Greek language to a bird, now that bird can learn the speech of men, and that bird is called the babaga, or the parrot. First, the Greek brings a great mirror and places it between himself and the bird. Then he begins to talk to the bird, and immediately the bird, the parrot, hears his voice. It turns around, and when it sees its own form reflected in the mirror, it becomes pleased straight away and learns to speak Greek. In this manner, that is, with the object of making Eve believe that it was the serpent that spoke to her, did Satan enter in and dwell in the serpent, and he watched for the opportunity. And when he saw Eve by herself, he called her by name. And when she turned round toward him, she saw her own form reflected in him. And she talked to him, thinking that she was talking to herself. And thus Satan led her astray with lying words, because the nature of woman is soft and yielding, in my experience in most cases. And when Eve had heard from him concerning that particular tree, straight away she ran to it, and she plucked the fruit of disobedience from the tree of transgression of the command, and she ate. And immediately she found herself stripped naked, and she saw the hatefulness of her shame, and she ran away naked, and hid herself in another tree, and covered her nakedness with the leaves thereof. And she cried out to Adam, and he came to her, and she handed to him some of the fruit of which she had eaten, and he also ate. And when he ate, he also became naked. And he and Eve made girdles for their loins of the leaves of the fig trees. and these were arrayed in these girdles of ignominy for 3 hours. At midday they received their sentence of doom. And Elohim made for them tunics of skin, which was stripped from the trees, not from animals. Maybe he made skin for the first time from trees, that is to say, the bark of the trees, because the trees that were in paradise had soft barks, and they were softer than the byssus and silk wherefrom the garments worn by kings were made. And Elohim dressed them in the soft skin, which was thus spread over a body of infirmities. And a little more. This is good. The fathers of the Ethiopian church, remember, that's the only church that really incorporates these legends in any detail, especially with their inclusion of the book of Enoch in their canon. They emphasized the difficulty which Satan found in entering paradise. He knew that he couldn't carry out his plan for ruining Adam if he entered paradise in his own form, and he decided that he must assume the form of some bird or animal or reptile. If he were to succeed, he applied to the white bird Arzel, and the green bird Besel, and a red bird, but each refused to take him to the place where Eve was. Then he applied to the elephant, and the lion, and the leopard, and the hyena, and the wild boar. The first 4 refused, point blank, to do what Satan wished, and the wild boar attempted to gore him with his tusks. On this, Satan took flight. He then went to the animal Sereg, which is commonly known as the digger of graves. But this animal refused to help him, and then Satan approached the animal called Taman, the front part of which was like a camel's foal. This creature agreed to help him, and mounted on his back, Satan entered paradise and stood before Eve. The serpent became spokesman for him, and Eve hearkened to him and ate of the fruit. According to the book of the mysteries of heaven and earth, the tree was called Sezen, and each fruit cluster contained 150,000 grains or berries. It's described as a large and handsome tree, and it has been identified with one that exists called the sandalye, or sandalwood tree. According to the same authorities, the tree of life was the prototype of the cross on which our Lord was crucified. This particular text is full of stuff. Again, it's called the Cave of Treasures. And what I read was just a small excerpt of the text itself and some notes, and added a few notes of my own. If you'd like to look at this text, it is translated for you on sacred-texts.com. You can find it there with the search engine. Now we might investigate where the Nephilim and Gibborim ended up. But let me explain. Depending on where you look, the Enochian scriptures vary between 7 and 10 heavens. Most of these are under the earth. And as I mentioned before, we have Gehenna, or what is often translated as hell in the New Testament. It is on earth, and it's the trash heap of the old Jerusalem, always full of rotting corpses and the worms that eat the rotting flesh, and fires of trash burning, dead babies, and any other kinds of execrations you can think of. So there's always fire and smoke coming out of Gehenna, again translated, unfortunately, as hell. When Yeshua talks about somebody going to hell, it just simply means their dead body ends up on the trash heap, not that their soul goes someplace for eternity. What has been made of these passages is something that existed, but so convoluted and so augmented that the present understanding of Gehenna is a place of eternal torment for the souls of people who have died. That's not the case, though, in the literature. From the burning trash heap south of Jerusalem, Gehenna, there is a corridor that goes down into the earth. And the corridor splits off into several other corridors or caves, and at the end of each one, there is a great open space inside of the earth where certain go to dwell or are sent there by the judge. We're especially speaking of those unspirited humans Sinners who haven't tasted the heavenly gift of eternal life. Well, they all end up in Gehenna, but they are dead.
You may contact us at Jackson Snyder Presents at this email address, veroyahad@gmail.com. That is veroyahad@gmail.com. And let me remind you, you are listening to Jackson Snyder Presents with your host tonight, Bogdan G. Shrumkov. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back. Jackson Snyder Present is back. Join us now for more of this interesting discussion.
We're especially speaking of those unspirited humans, sinners who haven't tasted the heavenly gift of eternal life. Well, they all end up in Gehenna, but they are dead. They're burning on the trash heap. They're of no use anymore. They don't live anymore until there be a resurrection of the dead. These various cells inside the earth are given titles, and each one has the title of a heaven. We think of heaven being up in the clouds someplace, but according to the Second Temple literature, that's not where it is. The heavens are inside the earth, except if you're talking about the heavens as the Shamayim, or skies, and again 7 to 10 heavens. For those angels who can't die, they're imprisoned in one or the other of these cells, and specifically in either the second heaven or the fifth heaven. These two cells, the second and the fifth, have an underground river that keeps them separated. That river is an extension of Gehenna from the top of the earth and contains the same types of fire that Gehenna on earth has. So specifically, the second and fifth heavens are what we're going to talk about, because the Nephilim are taken by Michael and the other angels into one, and the Gibborim, their offspring, who also can't die, at least not the angelic part of them, though the human part ends up in the trash heap. The second heaven is where they are imprisoned. And we talk about the older concept of Sheol, which was like a nothingness, dark place in the earth, primarily the grave. By the Second Temple period, the understanding of Sheol had been expanded to especially these two heavens, the second and the fifth. We probably read this the most plainly in the book of the Secrets of Enoch, also called Slavonic Enoch, also called Second Enoch. And again, I want to read to you from primary source of these 7 heavens so we can understand what the concept of imprisonment meant to these Second Temple Jews and believers afterward. So Enoch is on his heavenly journeys from one heaven to another, from one place on earth to the other, from one place in the sky to the other, and then we get the account of the taking up of Enoch into the fifth heaven. And here it is. The men took and brought me up into the fifth heaven, and I saw there many hosts, armies, not to be counted, called Grigori. Of course, this is translated out of the Slavonic language, and that word Grigori is plural, and they are equivalent to the fallen angels or Nephilim spirits who are imprisoned. And their appearance was like men, and their size was greater than that of the giants. And their countenances were withered, and their lips are always silent, and there was no service in the fifth heaven. And I said to the men who were with me, Why are these men very withered, and their faces melancholy, and their lips silent, and there is no service in this heaven? And they said to me, These are the Gregorii, who, with their prince Satanael, Satan, rejected the Kadosh Master. And in consequence of these things, they are kept in great darkness in the second heaven. So he begins to talk about his journey into the fifth heaven, but the men, or the angel guides, first direct him in information about the second heaven. And of them there went 3 to the earth from the throne of Elohim to the place Hermon. And they entered into dealings on the side of Mount Hermon, speaking of Mount Hermon, in northern Israel, and they saw the daughters of man that they are fair, and took unto themselves wives. And they made the earth foul with their deeds, and they acted lawlessly in all times of this age, and wrought confusion, and the giants, the Gibborim, the Gigante, were born, and the strangely tall men, and there was much wickedness. And on account of this, Elohim judged them with a mighty judgment. And they lamented for their brethren, and they will be punished at the great day of Yahweh.
If I might, I should jump in here and talk about Mount Hermon for just a minute. If you see Mount Hermon for a distance away, it looks like a camel's back, a 2-humped camel with depression between the 2 humps. And this is why. Because when the angels fell, they came down at such force on Mount Hermon that they broke the mountain into 2, went through the mountain, and came out the bottom. Yes, went right through the mountain and came out the bottom on ground level. And on Mount Hermon today, there is a mighty cave that goes through the mountain from the ground level up to the top. The passageway or corridor that those angels were broken through. Now that cave front is magnificent, and it has been called for many centuries the mouth of Baal. And you will see on a map that there is a town close by there called Banias or Panias, because the mouth of Baal was known for centuries before Messiah to be the worship place of every foul demon, and especially in Roman times, in Greek times, it was for the worship of Pan, P-A-N, and therefore we have the name of that place. That town is Panias or Banias, after Pan. And if you go there today, you will be truly surprised to see it. It looks like a gigantic demonic mouth with teeth, and you can still see all the kukaba built into the mouth of that cave, where in the past statues were erected for the worship of these demons, and especially, again, Pan. And it's a mighty spectacle.
Well, yes, I was there, actually, years ago. And when I found out what it was, I just absolutely marveled. I have a picture of the mouth of Baal. I'll have to get it out for the YouTube presentation, and maybe I can get it out for the podcast too. But you might want to look that up and see what it looks like. Mouth of Baal, B-A-A-L, at Banias, off of Mount Hermon, because you will be amazed if you haven't seen it before. And no, we were not allowed to go in there, but my friend, I didn't want to go in there, especially in case what the legends say was actually true. Fortunately, when you got done visiting the mouth of Baal, you can walk a little ways from there. There's a wonderful little pool with a little waterfall, traditionally known as the place where David wrote the 23rd Psalm, and at least the last time I was there, you can get into that pool, which is a steady 68 degrees, and cleanse yourself of the spiritual debris that you picked up at the mouth of Baal. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Brother Shroomkopf. I had forgotten about that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I said to the Grigori, I have seen your brethren and the works and their great torments, and I have prayed for them, but Elohim has condemned them to be under the earth till the heaven and earth are ended forever. And I said, why do you wait, brethren, and not serve before the face of Yahweh, and perform your duties before the face of Yahweh, and do not anger Yahweh to the end? And they listened to my rebuke. And they stood in the four orders in this heaven, and lo, as I was standing with these men, 4 trumpets resounded together with loud voice. And the Grigori sang with one voice, and their voices went forth before Yahweh with sadness and tenderness. As for the second heaven, we find it also described in 2nd Enoch in this way. And the men took me and brought me to the second heaven, and showed me the darkness. And there I saw the prisoners suspended, reserved for and awaiting the eternal judgment. And these angels were gloomy in appearance, more than the darkness of the earth. And they unceasingly wept every hour. And I said to the men who were with me, why are these men continually tortured? And the men answered me, these are they who apostatized from Yahweh, who obeyed not the commandments of Elohim, and took counsel of their own will, and transgressed together with their prince, and have been already confined to the second heaven. And I felt great pity for them. And lo, the angels made obeisance to me, and said to me, O man of Elohim, pray for us to Yahweh. And I answered them, who am I, a mortal man, that I should pray for angels? Who knows whither I go, or what awaits me, or who prays for me? And now, this is not part of our subject. Let's just go on to the third heaven, because we hear the third heaven mentioned by the apostate Paul. And 2nd Enoch says this of the third heaven, that these men took me from thence and brought me to the third heaven, and placed me in the midst of a garden, a place such as has never been known for the goodliness of its appearance. And I saw the trees of beautiful colors, and their ripe fruit and fragrance, and all kinds of food which they produced, springing up with delightful fragrance. And in the midst there is the tree of life, in that place of which Elohim rests when he comes into paradise. And this tree cannot be described for its excellent and sweet odor. And it is beautiful more than any created thing. And all sides in appearance, it is like gold and crimson and transparent as fire, and it covers everything. So in this place there are trees, and then there is the tree of life. And this is the place where Elohim rests when he comes into paradise. So we see that Eden is in the third heaven, and depending on where you read, that is under the earth, or it's on the earth, or in some cases, the primitive writer says that it's above the earth, depending on where you look. From the root of the tree in the garden there go forth 4 streams, which pour honey and milk, oil and wine, and are separated in 4 directions, and go about with a soft course. And they go down to the paradise of Eden, between corruptibility and incorruptibility. So perhaps it's talking about the fact that underneath the earth, Eden extends from the Tigris-Euphrates area right on down, and depending on whether you're corporal or not, you go to different levels of that, whichever your environment, be it physical or spiritual, is to be. And they go down to the paradise of Eden, between corruptibility and incorruptibility. Leave that for you to interpret. And thence they go along the earth and have a revolution in their circle like also the other elements. And there is another tree, an olive tree, always distilling oil. And there is no tree there without fruit, and every tree is blessed. And there are 300 angels very glorious who keep the garden, and with never-ceasing voices in blessed singing, they serve Yahweh every day. And I said, what a very blessed place is this? And those men spoke to me. This place, O Enoch, is prepared for the righteous who endure every kind of attack in their lives, from those who afflict their souls, who turn away their eyes from unrighteousness, and accomplish a righteous judgment, and also give bread to the hungry, and clothe the naked, and raise the fallen, and assist the orphans who are oppressed, and who walk without blame before the face of Yahweh, and serve him only. For them this place is prepared as an eternal inheritance. And on the other hand, the men led me to the northern region and showed me there a terrible place, and there are all sorts of tortures in that place, savage darkness, impenetrable gloom, and there's no light there. But a gloomy fire is always burning, and a fiery river goes forth. And all that place has fire on all sides, and on all sides ice and cold. Thus it burns and freezes, and the prisoners are very savage. And the angels, terrible and without pity, carrying savage weapons, and their torture was unmerciful. And I said, Woe, woe, how terrible is this place! And the men said to me, This place, Enoch, is prepared for those who do not honor Elohim, who commit evil deeds on earth, sodomy, witchcraft, enchantments, devilish magic, and who boast of their evil deeds, stealing, lying, calumnies, envy, evil thoughts, fornication, and murder, who steals the souls of wretched men, oppressing the poor and spoiling them of their possessions, and themselves grow rich by the taking of other men's possessions, injuring them, who when they might feed the hungry, allow them to die of famine, who when they might clothe them, strip them naked, and who do not know their Creator and have worshipped gods without life, who can neither see nor hear, being vain gods, and have fashioned the forms of idols, and bow down to a contemptible thing made with hands, and all these this place is prepared for an eternal inheritance. So those are worth noting. In another place, the third heaven is split into two. On one side is paradise, the other side is hell or Sheol, and the two are separated by a great divide, a great chasm that cannot be crossed. Now, these accounts talk about angels inhabiting these places, but it sounds to me like they're talking about living men. So, if the natural man dies and is dead until the judgment, and these places are for an eternal inheritance, it must be talking about after the resurrection of the dead. Now, one other matter we'll bring up here concerning the second and fifth heavens. In another place, the Nephilim are so despondent, and when asked why, they say it's because they are separated from their children who they love. Of course, they're speaking of the Gibborim, who are in the other heaven, and separated, of course, by rock and a river or lake of fire. So the Nephilim have these feelings of love and attention toward their children, who were giants, but are now inhabiting the other side of the fire, and they complain that they can't go over to fellowship with their families. On the other hand, the Gibborim, those offspring of Nephilim and humans, who have been destroyed on earth The angelic part of what they are is down in this place, and the important thing is they have no feeling at all for their parents or anyone else. They are psychopathological. They are psychopathological. So while the parent angels are pining for their families are not pining for them. A perfect example of what one old lady said one time in regards to children. They're so cute now and so fun to play with, but they just grow up to break your heart. Note also that the Nephilim were sorrowful and wanted to repent, but they were not permitted to repent. On the other hand, the Gibborim, the offspring, were extremely sinful to the greatest degree and so lacking in feelings for others that they absolutely had no ability to emote, to love their parents, to do good, to do anything else but use and consume people. I think this is a very important lesson here from 2nd Enoch. But I have other things to do now, so I must make an end of Slavonic 2nd Secret Enoch and go back for a short time into 1st Enoch, or Ethiopic Enoch. Now I see we're almost out of time. Let me give you the short excerpt from 1st Enoch that deals with fallen angels, but what I didn't get into was Chinese Enoch. Maybe I'll have to do another one, because there's a lot in the Chinese Manichaean Wigger version that we don't have in the others. Here's the original story, or at least what we think is the original story, of the fall of angels. So it happened, when the Benim Am multiplied, beautiful and wholesome daughters were born. So the Malachim, these children of the Shemaiah, saw them and lusted for them. They said to one another, "Come on, let us choose wives from the Yelodim Ha'am and spawn our own Yelodim." Semyaza, their chief, said to them, "I am afraid you will not all agree to do this, and I will have to pay the penalty of a great chata alone." They all answered him, saying, "We will all swear an oath, binding ourselves to vows not to abandon our plan. We will fulfill it." So together they swore, binding themselves by vows. There were 200 in all. They descended into Ardos, the summit of Mount Arman in Yared's lifetime. They call it Mount Arman because they had sworn and bound themselves by curses upon it. These are the names of their chiefs: Semyaza, the ruler of them all, and Arakeb, Ramael, Tamel, Ramel, Danel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Azel, Amoros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Sasomaspiel, Kestorel, Turel, Yomeal, and Araziel. These are the rulers of tens and all the rest. 1 Enoch 7. With these, all the other Malachim took themselves wives, each choosing one, and they began to go into them and defile themselves with them. They taught them charms and spells, and the cutting of roots to make them skillful with herbs. They became expectant. They bore great Rephaim, whose heights were 3,000 ells. They used up all the provisions. When the Benim Am could no longer sustain them, these ogres turned and devoured them. They started to commit crimes against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, and then to eat one another's bodies, even drinking the blood. It was at this point that the earth laid an accusation against these lawless ones. Azazel taught them to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and made known to them earth metals, and the skill of working them for bracelets and other jewelry. Also, the use of antimony for coloring their eyelids, along with all types of precious stones, and prescriptions for dyeing. From these teachings, there arose great disobedience. The Benim Am were led astray. They committed immorality. They became corrupted in all their ways. Amazras taught cursing and root-cutting. Armoros, curse-lifting. Barakiel taught star signs. Kukararel, star patterns. Ezekiel, cloud lore. Erakiel, land signs. Shamsiel, sun signs. Tamel, star signs. And Azdarel, moon pathways. As the Ben-Imam perished, they cried out, and their cry went up to the Shamayim. The four Malachim to Yahweh Le'olam, 1 Enoch 9. Then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gavriel looked down from the Shamayim and saw much blood being shed on the earth, and all the lawlessness wrought thereupon. They said to one another, "This emptied world carried the voice of wailing up to the Shemaiah gates. Now Kadosh Shemaiah dwellers state their case to you, saying, bring our cause before the El Elyon." That is just packed with power. However, our time is up for the session. We're going to have to go into a fourth episode to interpret the passages of 1st Enoch and get into the Chinese Enoch. See you then. See you